Hours of history facing fascism in World War II, Vice President Henry Wallace stood out as a symbolic vision of what humanity could achieve in a post-World War II world. Wallace saw that we couldn't crawl back into an isolationist stance, but must look outward to truly be our brother's keeper on a worldwide scale. In 1942, Wallace made his most well-known speech referred to as the Common Man's Speech. In it, he outlined what he hoped America and the world could be after World War II was over. In the speech, he outlined ideas like equal pay for equal work amongst all races and genders, and an end to military and economic imperialism by European colonizers and the United States. The speech, and Wallace himself, ended up enjoying widespread working class support around the free world. While Wallace became the hero of the people, he was an enemy of the elite. Politicians, industrial leaders, and Wall Street had accumulated wealth and power through imperialism and exploitation of the workers, and they viewed Wallace's vision as a threat to their power. World War II was also more than a foreign issue. American manufacturing profited immensely from the production of armaments and vehicles. Despite the influx of money, workers' wages remained the same. As a result, this era saw more strikes by workers than at any other time in American history. This divide between workers and owners was most notable in Detroit, which was a key manufacturing city. Detroit had recently seen a massive influx in the black population being forced to flee racial terrorism in the South. Jim Crow and racial inequalities resulted in violence between the black community and the entirely white Detroit police force. After touring Detroit following a heinous race riot, Wallace famously stated that we cannot fight to crush Nazi brutality abroad and condone race riots at home. Wallace saw that we could not claim to be the champion of democracy if we treated everyone that didn't look like me as a second-class citizen at home. Sadly, though, corruption and capitalistic greed prevented Wallace's vision for the century of a common man from becoming a reality. While Wallace's speech was set in the context of World War II fighting the Nazis, the crux of the speech continues to see many of the same protagonists and obstacles in our society today. As we go through this speech of Wallace's Century of the Common Man, see if you can see how the issues that America faced during Wallace's lifetime are the same issues that we continue to face today. It is worthwhile to refresh our minds about the march of freedom for the common man. The idea of freedom, the freedom that we in the United States know and love so well with its extraordinary emphasis on the dignity of the individual. Upon our nation's founding in 1776, the march of the common people had just begun. Most of them did not yet know how to read and write. There were no public schools. Men and women cannot really be free until they have plenty to eat and time and ability to read and think and talk things over. They have learned, and we are still learning, the art of production, how to make a living. They have learned and are still learning the art of self-government. If we are to measure freedom by standards of nutrition, education, and self-government, we might rank the United States and certain nations of Western Europe very high. Everywhere, reading and writing are accompanied by industrial progress, and industrial progress sooner or later and inevitably brings a strong labor movement. Everywhere, the common people are on the march. By the millions, they are learning to read and write, learning to think together, learning to use tools. They're learning to think and work together in labor movements. some of which may be extreme or a little impractical at first, but which eventually will settle down to serve effectively the interest of the common man. When the freedom-loving people march, when the farmers have an opportunity to buy land at reasonable prices and sell the produce of their land through their own organizations, when workers have the opportunity to form unions and bargain through them collectively, and when the children of all the people have an opportunity to attend schools which teach them the truth of the real world, when these opportunities are open to everyone, then the world moves straight ahead. The March of Freedom of the past 150 years has been a long, drawn-out people's revolution. In this great revolution of the people, there was the American Revolution of 1775, the French Revolution of 1789, the Latin American revolutions of the Bolivarian era, the German Revolution of 1848, and the Russian Revolution of 1917. Each spoke for the common man in terms of blood on the battlefield. Some went to excess, but the significant thing is that the people groped their way to the light. More of them learned to think and work together. The People's Revolution aims at peace and not at violence. But if the rights of the common man are attacked, it unleashes the ferocity of the she-bear who has lost a cub. The truth is that when the rights of the American people are transgressed, as these rights have been transgressed, the American people will fight with a relentless fury. The people are on the march towards an even fuller freedom than the most fortunate peoples of the world have hitherto enjoyed. The people in their millennial and revolutionary march towards manifesting here on earth the dignity that is in every human soul hold as their credo the 4 freedoms enunciated by President Roosevelt in his message to Congress on January 6, 1941. These 4 freedoms are the very core of the revolution for which the United Nations have taken their stand. We who live in the United States may think that there is nothing very revolutionary about freedom of religion, freedom of expression, and freedom from fear. But when we begin to think about the significance of freedom from want for the average man, then we know that the revolution of the past 150 years has not been completed, either here in the United States or any other place in the world. We know that this revolution cannot stop until the freedom from want has actually been attained. This peace must mean a better standard of living for the common man, not only in the United States and England, but also in India, Russia, China, and Latin America. Some have spoken of an American century. I say that the century on which we are entering, the century which will come into being after this war, can and must be the century of the common man. Perhaps it will be America's opportunity to support the freedoms and duties by which the common man must live. Everywhere, the common man must learn to build his own industries with his own hands in practical fashion. Everywhere, the common man must learn to increase his productivity so that he and his children can eventually pay to the world community all that they have received. No nation will have the God-given right to exploit other nations. Older nations will have the privilege to help younger nations get started on the path to industrialization. But there must be neither military nor economic imperialism. Modern science, when devoted wholeheartedly to the general welfare, has in it potentialities of which we have not been able to yet dream. International cartels that serve American greed must go. Cartels in the peace to come must be subjected to international control for the common man, as well as being under adequate control by the respective home governments. With international monopoly pools under control, it will be possible for inventions to serve all the people instead of only the few. Yes, and when the time of peace comes, the citizen will again have a duty. The consumer will have a duty, the supreme duty of sacrificing the lesser interest for the greater interest of the general welfare. Those who write the peace must think of the whole world. There can be no privileged peoples. We ourselves in the United States are not a master race. We cannot perpetuate economic warfare without planting the seeds of military warfare. We must use our power at the peace table to build an economic peace that is charitable and enduring. If we really believe that we are fighting for a people's peace, all the rest becomes easy. Production? Yes. It will be easy to get production without either strikes or sabotage. There can be no half measures. North, south, east, west, and middle west. The will of the American people is for complete victory. The people's revolution is on the march, and we who fight in the people's cause will never stop until that cause is won. Thankfully, Henry Wallace's story doesn't have to reside as a pie-in-the-sky dream of the past. Wallace understood that in rebuilding our economy following the war, we cannot revert back to the status quo. In working to rebuild our infrastructure and economy, Wallace saw that a Jim Crow version of America was a relic of the past. Wallace envisioned a future where the United States started to live up to its billing as a land of opportunity for all, not just some. An America and global society that embraced and highlighted our diversity instead of grasping for a decrepit system of white supremacy. Much like Wallace's vision nearly 80 years ago, we cannot afford to revert back to the pre-COVID status quo once we reach the light at the end of the pandemic. We have the means and resources to finally live up to Wallace's vision of the century of the common man. If we can ever remove the blinders of austerity neoliberalism and dare to once again dream of bold progressive policies, we can achieve this. Instead of simply focusing on physical infrastructure like roads and bridges, we must invest in social infrastructure. Policies like a federal job guarantee, defunding the police, Medicare for all, a global Green New Deal, and reparations can help us achieve the bigger picture of providing the common man with the freedom from want that Wallace proclaimed nearly a century ago.
Dreams that you dare to dream really do.